Welcome back to Old School Sports and our OOTP 23 playthrough of the Pittsburgh Pirates. We are at about the midway point of the 2048 season, and although the Pirates have been playing better as of late, it's been a struggle this year. 43-40 record, just a little bit above 500, 7 games back in the NL Central. So thank you for listening to and watching this episode. Appreciate all of our viewers. If you haven't taken time to subscribe yet, would appreciate that, and always interested in hearing your comments and thoughts down below. And we have a very new situation here midway through our 11th season as general manager of the Pirates. We have new ownership, and our owner since the beginning of this playthrough had been the penny-pinching Bob Nutting. We thought when he departed the team, our job would get easier. He turned the team over to his son when he virtually passed away, and unfortunately the situation for us is even worse. In addition to also being a penny pincher in terms of his fiscal personality like his father, Robert Nutting Jr. is demanding in terms of his patience and meddling in terms of his involvement. So he potentially is going to be giving us lots of crazy goals to try to focus on. And you can see we've already got a big list of those from Mr. Nutting Jr., and also conceivably could be changing some of our budgets down the line, which is always infuriating to me as a general manager. So can see he wants us back in the playoffs this year, wants us to upgrade at third, wants us to improve our defensive efficiency, wants us to extend Danny Robles, sign a locally popular player, and reach the World Series by 2051. So a veritable laundry list of things that we need to do. Aren't going well with any of them. So we did just make an offer to extend Danny Robles, the left-handed reliever, out of the bullpen. He was looking for 4 years at about $2.25 million a year, with a player option for the fourth season. We made an offer of 4 years at about $1.85 million a year with a team option for the fourth season to him. He also is an extremely popular player, both nationally and locally. I don't know if that'll sound as I don't know if that will qualify as an acquisition because it's really just an extension. But at the very least, if we get him signed to a relatively cheap extension, that will give us, excuse me, little credibility with Mr. Nutting Jr. and also hopefully help give us a little boost in fan interest, which has been flagging a bit with our poor performance on the field this year. So we should find out in the next few days whether we're able to get Robles signed to that extension. Otherwise, through the rest of this episode, hoping to get a better performance on the field, start stringing some long winning streaks together, get back into playoff position with this team potentially. And we've got international amateur free agency coming up in about a month. In about a week, we've got the amateur draft in about 3 weeks. And then we've got the trade deadline coming up, and we do have some money to bring on some contracts potentially. Just was kind of checking who's available on the trade block. Not a ton that's very interesting yet here on June 24th. Hopefully that list will get more interesting over the next couple of weeks, and obviously we can do some player searches to try to acquire people who aren't on the trade block as well. But right now there's no obvious moves, but we do have the opportunity to do some hopefully improving of the team through the trade market over the next 5 weeks or so. And Danny Robles did sign that extension. The fans are excited about that, so that should give us a little bit of a boost in fan interest to have him locked up. You can see we're also in the midst of doing some final scouting of a bunch of the players who are going to be available in the amateur draft shortly. Taking a look at the front office, had 1 point boost in fan interest, assuming that it hadn't deteriorated further. And then looking at our owner goals, at least we got the extension signed with Danny Robles. So gives us a little bit more credibility with ownership, but I'm not going to enjoy a meddling owner. If you hire me to be your GM, stay out of my way. I've been doing this a long time at this point. I have a legendary reputation. Open up your checkbook and get out of my way. And that doesn't seem to be the way things are going to work with Mr. Nutting Jr. And we've made it to July 1st, slipped back a little bit over the last week of June, 45-45 record, so flat-footed 500 record here, and we're getting to the point in the season where, we are what our record says we are, and we're 7.5 games back and a 500 team. Only 2 games back for the wild card, so we are definitely still in the playoff mix, but we're going to have to start playing better, and we're going to have to start playing better soon. Looking at the team statistics, 13th in runs scored, 8th in runs allowed. It's been a rough year, but we were better in June, 17-11, basically offset the horrible May that we had, and then a respectable April offset the real slow start to the season that we had in March. But need to start stringing some winning months together here as the weather heats up. And being July 1st, we're also at the International Amateur Free Agent signing period. Looking at pitchers, only 2 that we'd consider. Marco Duran, good personality, but with that poor changeup, he's really a reliever. Kind of a fallback guy. Hopefully we'll find some better options than him. Victor Alvarez out of the Dominican, actually a similar, better stuff with a great fastball potentially and a nice sinker. But really a reliever, so probably not going to chase after either of those guys. Hopefully there's a batter that's more interesting. And at least based on the star ratings, there is third baseman Jose Ortega, 16-year-old out of the Dominican, kind of a prototypical third base defensive profile. Not great defensively, but you could live with him there if he's got a good bat. Pretty good contact, home run power, and eye potential. Not a lot of speed, so not going to have a lot of extra base hits. Kind of will strike out an average amount of time if he develops as expected. So he is a good prospect. Doesn't completely jump off the page to me. A couple other third basemen to look at. Marcelo Cornejo. Decent personality. That turn double play rating, even for a third baseman, is pretty brutal. Similar batting profile, actually, with good contact, home run power, and eye, not much speed. And then another third baseman, Mike Salazar, out of Panama. Smart, third baseman, defensive profile, durable, decent hitting prospect. Our scouting accuracy on him is low. Desiderio Marinas, shortstop, like the personality with the high work ethic. Really more of a second baseman, quite honestly, with that arm, but could be a respectable defensive second baseman. A little bit of a hitter. Don't love any of these prospects. Obviously, we're going to make an offer to somebody. We've got $5 million budgeted. Got a penny pinching owner who's also going to be difficult. We're going to spend the money while we've got it available. Just not sure exactly who we're going to spend it on. And I think we'll make an offer to Jose Ortega. I think he's the best prospect. Really good contact potential and can have some power and walk. So he's going to get on base pretty well. As we've talked about, he's a third baseman. Don't love the double play rating with him either, but it's a little better than that other guy that we talked about. Is 6'6", so we could definitely move him to first base. Could also play him in a corner outfield spot. I think he's the best player out there. Not thrilled with any of them, but we'll offer him the full $5 million and see what happens. And actually, my eyes are getting bad in my old age. He's only 6 foot tall, not 6'6". I thought it said 6'6", 170, which seemed unnecessarily lanky. But still think he's probably the best prospect, but more of a third baseman or a corner outfielder when all is said and done if he fully develops. And we did get Jose Ortega signed, so that's good. That will help bolster our lagging farm system a bit at this point, ranked 28th overall at this point, so we've actually moved back. Fallen back during the season. Jonathan Marroquin, who I believe was 37th or 39th at the start of the year, has dropped back to the 183rd prospect in baseball. 16-year-old shortstop who's probably more of a second baseman, really. Still one of the better prospects in our system. But hopefully the recent addition of Mr. Ortega, who certainly in terms of his potential at this point is viewed as the highest potential player we've got in the international complex, will help us out down the line. And as we close in on the All-Star break, Pirates a game above 500, 48 and 47. It'll be interesting to see how many All-Stars we have this year. We've had a lot in past seasons, but team was playing a lot better in past seasons also. Sean Street, our ace, 8-4 record, 3.32 ERA, so the starting pitcher is an all-star. Catcher Andres Coronel, 283 average and 251 at-bats, back as an all-star again. And that is it. So only 2 all-stars for the Pirates, which is a very low number for us for the past decade, really, most of the past decade at least, when we've been a perennial playoff team with 7 consecutive playoff appearances at this point. Have generally had more than 2 all-stars almost every season. So we're not doing as well on the field, and part of the reason we're not doing as well on the field is that we don't have as many players having big seasons as we've had in previous years, unfortunately. And this is going to be a big draft for the Pirates. As I mentioned, our minor league system is depleted at this point. We've been picking near the end of the draft for most of the past decade. And we've also traded away some of our prospects to keep the team competitive at the major league level, which we've done successfully. But it is going to be a very important draft for us. Got the 30th pick because we were the best record in baseball last year, even though we didn't win it all. And then we've also got a sandwich pick in the supplemental first round from the departure of Luis Longoria. And part of the reason this is going to be so important, in addition to the 2 first-round picks that we have, with the fact that we had some money available this year and there weren't any particularly interesting free agents to sign it on, we put $25 million into the draft budget. So my thought is in the second or third round, if we get one of those players who's looking for 12, 13, 14, $15 million, that is very difficult to impossible to sign, we can potentially take a flyer on one of those players with all of this money that we put into the draft budget. So my hope is that potentially we can get 3 first-round talents with the amount of money we put in into the draft this year, the 2 players that we take in the first round, and then hopefully there will be somebody else looking for big money that other teams won't be able to afford that may sign to us, that may slide to us in the second or third round. So the draft is now underway. Obviously, I've spent some time scouting out over the past 3 months. A lot of high-end first base talent at the top of the draft, at least in terms of the star ratings. Guessing some of those bats who probably aren't great fielders may be around by the time we're picking. Taking a look at the pitchers, it drops off pretty quickly. A lot of kind of 3-star kind of talent out there. The real top-end talent, particularly in terms of guys who can actually be starters, is pretty limited, but we will see who's available for us at the end of the first round. And here with our 30th pick in the draft, the good news is that some of those high-end starters who are looking for crazy money are still available. Question is whether we want to take them now or maybe look for a little bit more value at this point and then hope that nobody else is willing to give somebody those huge demands over slot before our other pick in the first round or our second or third round picks. Taking a look at those top end pitchers, Hector Haynes, don't love the low leadership, but certainly looks like he can have an impressive 4, if not 5 pitch arsenal if that changeup develops. Enough stamina to be a starter, plus stuff, movement, and control if he completely develops. Don't love the personality and don't love that he's looking for $13.5 million. I don't think we take him number 1, but if he's a player that's lingering in a couple of rounds with that crazy demand, I would think about it. Danny Mendez, like the durability, kind of a 4-pitch arsenal, but still ultimately expected to have really good stuff, acceptable movement, decent control, looking for $8.5 million. Henry Northern, looking for $10.5 million. Kind of a 3-pitch guy, 4-pitch if that changeup develops, great stamina, really good stuff. Probably average-ish, maybe a little better movement, a little better than average control. Another decent prospect, Willie Mejia, similarly, 4 or 5 pitch arsenal, enough stamina to start, really good movement potential. I like all of these guys fine. I don't love any of them, but I'm kind of willing if one of them falls to either our next pick or the second round to chase after them. Cameron Miller, similar profile, a little bit more of a negative type personality. He'll probably be around a while. Hector Rios, 21-year-old pitcher out of the University of Pittsburgh. Surprised that he's not locally very popular. But he's a guy who's pretty close to major league ready at this point. Think he's a 4th or a 5th starter. Excuse me, but definitely someone to think about, someone looking for a little less money, but still at this point in the draft, that's over slot. And Ramon Trejo, really don't like the personality, 3-pitch starter. Certainly those top few guys were better, but not a huge amount of differentiation among these guys, and they're all looking for pretty big money. So my hunch is that at least one of them may be available in the second round for us. And certainly most of them would be available with our supplemental first round pick. So I don't think I'm going to go pitcher right now. Moving on to the top batting prospects, a couple of first basemen, as we talked about earlier. Moses Cooper, awful defensively, no speed, but certainly looks like he could have an above average bat. Not looking for a lot of money at all. Tyrell Robinson, just brutal defensively. Has DH written all over him because he's even worse in the outfield than he is at first base and infield. Going to draw a ton of walks. Pretty decent hitter. I mean, we're at the end of the first round. We're not going to likely see a difference maker, but don't love either of those guys. A couple shortstops here. Regis Morin. Like the personality. He's not really a shortstop. He could play anywhere in the infield. Could also basically play anywhere in the outfield. You wouldn't feel great about him at shortstop or center field, but pretty much can play anywhere else on the diamond defensively except catcher, shortstop, and center field. Looks like he could have a bit above average bat. Not a bad prospect, but not a great prospect either. The other shortstop is Jerry Rice out of Mississippi Valley State, actually Carthage, New York. I believe that's in the Adirondacks. Got good home run power, going to draw a lot of walks. Not all that exciting defensively, although he does have good range. Robbie Stuckey, right fielder. Like the good work ethic. Decent bat, not a ton of home run power. Do like the fact that he's got some speed. Can bunt a little bit. He's looking for slot. Catcher Danny Villa. Low leadership. A little bit of home run power. Decent eye. Second baseman Jose Castaneda. Oof, rough arm, but he is a second baseman. Decent bat. Eric Dew, third baseman. Like the high work ethic, like the durability. Don't love the glove. The bat's okay. Josh Lennar, great personality. Has some speed. Durable. He's intriguing to me, actually. Home run power is going to be an issue, and he's not going to walk a ton, but could be a real good contact, gap power, avoid strikeout hitter with that speed. Could hit for a pretty high average and a ton of extra base hits. Not great defensively, but with that personality and that durability, he's got a good chance of reaching his full potential. Mario Mesa, first baseman, another kind of meh first baseman. So I don't love anybody here, but it's the 30th pick in the draft. You're probably not going to find someone that you're going to fall in love with here. Just kind of searching on contact potential and power potential. Quite honestly, Moses Cooper, who we already talked about, looks like one of the most interesting packages of everything together. Just that he is a DH. See what the scouting director recommends. He recommends Regis Morin, shortstop that we talked about. Do like the personality. I don't think he's a great player, but he's solid. As we talked about, can basically play anywhere on the field except catcher, shortstop, or center field. Certainly looks with plus contact, plus power, and plus home run power. If he fully develops, could be a useful bat. Not a great bat, but a useful bat and a useful glove. Something to be said for a player like that, particularly when they have good work ethic and good durability. Not even looking for slot, I don't think. So, someone to think about. And I kind of want to hear with my two first round picks to maybe get clean people, clean prospects, and then take some more risk in the second and third round, particularly if we sign some of these batters. There's a chance conceivably we might be able to get those pitchers in both the second and third rounds and still have enough money to pull this together, which would be a bit of a win. I do like Josh Lenore. Love the personality, love the durability. Think he can be a pretty good major league hitter. But I also like Marin. They're kind of the two cleanest prospects of the everyday players, just in terms of being acceptable defensively, acceptable offensively, durable, good work ethics, decent personality traits. I hope Marin is around in 5 picks for our supplemental pick, but I think I'm going to go with Lenore. I feel like with that speed and that contact and gap power, this is a guy who could be a 300 hitter with 15, 10, 15 triples, 40 to 50 doubles, and a little bit of home run pop. Not going to have a great on-base percentage. That is probably the biggest thing against him. But he's a clean personality. Excuse me. As those of you who have been listening know, I've had a lingering COVID cough, even though I've been testing negative for several weeks now, which hasn't been a lot of fun, but I'm trying to continue to get videos out there. But I apologize for hacking and coughing in your ear a bit. Those of you who have watched me over the years know I'm a sucker for the really good personalities when all else is pretty equal. I think I'm going to go with Lenore here in the first round, and we're going to hope that Marin drops to us 5 picks from now. He is still out there. Scouting director still recommends him. We're going to go back to the shortstop here. Good personality, can play anywhere on the field, hopefully with that work ethic, and could develop plus contact, gap power, and home run power. Become a pretty useful player here with the 35th pick in the draft. So we are going to meet the demand for him. The slot is $2.5 million. He's only looking for 1.3. So we'll meet his demand and bring him on board. And now we wait and see who falls to us in the second and third round. We've only spent about $2.5 million, so we've got well over $20 million budgeted to spend. The hope is that a Mendez or a Northern, with their big demands, falls to us in the second round. That would be the hope. If one of these other decent starters also falls to us, we've got some potential options there with these guys that are all looking for money that's way above slot at this point. So the hope is that particularly a Mendez or a Northern falls to us, at the very least a Rios or a Trejo, and then maybe our theory of saving up a lot of money to spend on players looking way over slot in the second, third rounds will work out. We'll find out. Not quite. We've got a couple starters left here at the end of the second round. But the top line guys and the guys who are all demanding huge money, not around anymore. So the only impossible player left is Edgar Estrada. Not a horrible prospect. Not a brilliant prospect either. I have a feeling he'll be around in the third or fourth round. That impossible signability generally indicates to me that it's someone looking for $13, $14, $15 million a year, which we do potentially have to spend. Was hoping for a little more bang to the buck in the second round, but it didn't turn out that way. So good news is we're going to make a ton of money for the new Mr. Nutting Jr. this year. So taking a look at these pitchers who are still available, Tony Araujo, decent starting pitching prospect. Don't love the low control. Luis Galdamez, like the work ethic, like the durability. If that changeup develops, he could be a decent starter. The question is whether that changeup will develop and whether he's going to be a good starter or a good reliever. Danny Holcomb is a closer. Nice personality for the college player coming out of Mississippi. Not too far from being ready to contribute at the major league level. And Robbie Smrdy. Again, a guy who's completely reliant on that changeup developing. That's going to determine whether he's a starter or a reliever. But a good personality, ground ball pitcher. Not a horrible prospect. Kind of like Galdames, the best. But as I said, if that changeup doesn't develop, he's a good reliever. So from that perspective, Araujo, 4 pitches. Just don't love the low control. And back to the everyday players, Stuckey, Dew, and Mesa still all around. Kind of think I probably like Stuckey the best. Good personality, could be a decent major league hitter, has some speed. See what the scouting director recommends. He recommends Dew rather than Stuckey. The third baseman, also high work ethic, durable, decent bat. It's going to be one of those 2 guys. I don't love the pitchers enough, and I get that they probably won't be around in the 3rd round, but just not feeling real strong about any of them, because the ones that I like the most very well could end up relievers. The 2nd round is a little high for a reliever as far as I'm concerned. I like Robbie Stuckey a little better than Eric Dew, so I think I'm going to go with Stuckey here, just looking for slot. Draft him in the 2nd round. Move on to our next pick. Dew is still out there. Question is whether there's any pitchers out there. Araujo is. Could be time to take a flyer on him or Dew. I'm assuming the scouting director is still going to say Eric Dew. Decent prospect for the 3rd round. Could use a pitcher, though, even if he's not a great prospect. Other than that control, the stuff should be really good. The movement above average. He's a lefty. I don't think that Dew is such a transformational prospect that it might not be time to go after a pitcher. So I think we're going to go with Araujo. I'm sure one of you knows how to pronounce that name, and you could tell me. We will pick Tony here in the 3rd round. Finally go with a pitcher. Auto draft to the 4th round. Dew is gone. Scouting director recommends Dirkjan Placeman, Dutch left fielder. But we've also got Edgar Estrada, the impossible to sign player, here in the 4th round. Given that we budgeted all this money, he's not a transformational prospect, but want to spend that money on somebody. Like his durability, like his intelligence. We've got a good coaching staff. Maybe they're going to be able to unlock some potential in terms of his mechanics to make him better than we think he is. We're going to at least bring on somebody to use up some of that money, potentially. We'll see exactly what he's looking for. But we're going to draft Estrada, the impossible to sign player, here in the 4th round. And here in the 5th round, scouting director still recommending the Dutch left fielder, David Ramos, decent defensively, and Alex Salas, very good defensively, just never going to hit enough to be a major leaguer, are some of the better players that are out there. So that's not fair. He could definitely be a utility infielder major leaguer. I don't know that he's going to hit enough to be an everyday starter. But like the personality, like the defense, he's an interesting prospect at this point in the draft. And I think we are going to go with the glove and the good personality here in the 5th round. Durable. Born in Hawaii, high school in North Carolina, and going to college in Maine. He is a well-traveled young man. We're going to go ahead and pick Salas here in the 5th round. And if I come across anything else interesting over the last 15 rounds of the draft, I will let you know about it. And Plasman and Ramos are still here in the 6th round. For some reason, our scout is now recommending the center fielder Bobby Callahan. Don't love that personality or that bat at all. I think we'll go with the Dutch outfielder now in the 6th round, Dirkjan Plasman. And for the last few rounds, we're here in the 15th round. Our scout has been recommending Omar Gaston. Unfortunately, Omar Gaston has the personality of Gaston from Beauty and the Beast, and there's no way we're bringing this jerk onto our team. So with the draft over, we'll make offers to Lenore in addition to the offer that we already made to Regis Marin. Should be pretty easy to get everybody signed except for the impossible Edgar Estrada, but we've got tons of money to make him come to Pittsburgh if we decide that's the direction we want to go. And we've got so much money to spend that we're basically just meeting the offers of the guys who are above slot. That brings us to Edgar Estrada. We've got budget room of over $22 million, so it does look like, even though he's a penny pincher, that Mr. Nutting Jr. is willing to let us spend the money that we have for free agents available. Probably our last chance at signing him, significantly over $12.5 million to consider signing. Recommended slot is $620 for him. He's probably a 4th outfielder on a good team, but there's always a chance that he develops into something better, and we've got money to spend right now, so we're going to offer him $13.5 million, which is $1 million over what he supposedly, $1 million above the minimum. He says he wants significantly over that. I would think $1 million is getting significant. We'll see what he's got to say. And Edgar Estrada did join us, so we signed the impossible to sign player. Have him in our minor league system now. Hitting .500 in his first 6 at-bats, so hopefully the 4th rounder will develop into something. Was hoping that we would get a little more leverage out of the money that we had put into signing people, potentially. But unfortunately, those pitchers that we were targeting for the 2nd, possibly 3rd round didn't end up falling quite as far as we had hoped. And unfortunately, as we get near the end of June, the Pirates continue to struggle. 49-54 record. We have gotten all of our draftees signed, so that's positive. We got about $8 million to spend. Just a matter of finding someone who can help us. Taking a look at the pitching, we've given Valadez and Mike Wright pretty long leashes this year. They both have ERAs in the mid-5s as our 4th and 5th starters. That would be the most obvious area where we could potentially improve our team. Taking a look at the team stats, we're 14th in runs scored, 8th in runs allowed. So as much as I'd love to add a big starting pitcher who can improve us, obviously someone who can help with the bat would be helpful also. And taking a look at the trade block among the starting pitchers out there, most intrigued by Devin Hodge. He's only making $1.3 million. He is fragile, but he's a pretty respectable starting pitcher. 10-9 last year with a 3.45 ERA, 3-1 this year with a 3.10 ERA in limited action. His arbitration number next year is not that huge. I would tend to think he'd be pretty expensive, given that he's not making a ton of money. Pretty expensive in terms of what they want in trade for him, but at least go and explore, because I think he would definitely be an upgrade at the back end of our rotation. Yes, unfortunately, the only players they'd accept straight up for him are our number 2 starter, Alex Arroyo, and our number 3 starter, Devin Smith, who are both younger and much better than Mr. Hodge. So would have loved to bring him on board, but not going to do him at the price that the Phillies are looking for. And unfortunately, from looking through the batters who are on the trade block, no real difference makers out there this year. Some expensive players, but not anyone who I think is going to be a big-time boost to our team in terms of offense. So I think we're going to have to focus on maybe the second tier of starting pitchers that are available. Couple interesting-ish prospects. Xavier Rabb from the Royals. Not the best personality, but ground ball pitcher who throws in the mid to high 90s. Pretty established starter in the final year of his contract with them. And then Ethan Morrell, lefty from Detroit, making a lot of money. Has 1 year after this. Little older, but definitely an established starter. Depending on the price, either of those guys could be a upgrade for us above Valadez and Wright in the back end of our rotation right now. And unfortunately, the price for Xavier Rabb was pretty exorbitant, and Ethan Morrell exercised his 10-5 option to avoid a trade to us. So we've still got about 11 days till the trade deadline. So maybe we'll revisit things. Maybe there'll be some new players on the block. Maybe some of the asking prices will come down from these teams that are falling out of contention. But with us being 12 and a half games back, and with the fact that we are now 5.5 out of the wild card, we are very quickly becoming a team that looks like it's falling out of contention also. And the good news is we won today. Bad news is that Yoshitaro Nakahara, going on to the IL for the 3rd time this year, will be his longest stint there with a strained MCL. Hitting just a $199 this year with 5 homers and 151 at-bats. So he's been a huge disappointment for us. Big part of the reason why our offense has been disappointing. So we're going to put him back on the IL. Unfortunately for us, Alex Racho, our starting right fielder, is also on the IL right now. So we already had recalled Alex Perkins, but have to going to make another move. And if you look closely, you'll see that a diagnosis is pending on our ace, Sean Street. Clearly, if that is a significant injury to him, that's probably a sign that we want to, unfortunately, pivot to being sellers from being buyers. But we'll wait and see what happens with Street's injury with bated breaths. And Sean Street has a strained biceps. Going to be out for 5 weeks. 8-4 this year with a 3.39 ERA. I think that injury probably is the sign that we don't want to go chasing. We're 50-54. 13 back in the division. Got new ownership that's not going to be happy with us missing the playoffs for the first time in 7 years, but I think we were probably more than a player away, and we've just lost arguably the most important player on our team in Sean Street, the ace of our staff, for probably till September. So our pitching rotation is getting even weaker, which is not good. That injury will give us an opportunity to bring up Alfredo Servine, who was one of the final cuts coming out of spring training. 8-4 with a 3.52 ERA in AAA this year. Guy we picked up in a trade with the Padres almost 2 years ago at this point. Will be good to at least see what he can do at the major league level. And he may end up slotting right into the rotation as a fifth starter for us. We'll see what Vasquez wants to do. Now he wants to move Bobby Astorga into the rotation, which is fine. I think I am going to take Wright out, though. Liked having the lefty in the rotation, but clearly has not worked. Has over 100 innings pitched now, and you can see his ERA being a full-time starter as opposed to a full-time reliever is almost 3 runs higher this year than it was last year. Probably not a perfect correlation there, but I'll take it at this point as a sign that he is more effective as a reliever. And that'll put Servine into the fifth role, so I think that's the best thing we can do. Move Astorga into the rotation, move Servine into the rotation, and see how things go. And as we get near the end of July, we're 53 and 56. 14.5 out in the division, although we are up to third. Only 3.5 out from the wild card. So that final wild card spot is a team that is not incredible. So from that perspective, we're still in the mix. If we wanted to be sellers, Wright, who we just took out of the rotation, is in the last year of his contract. Gaylord, who's unhappy with us and having a rough year, is in the last year of his contract. But there's not a ton of guys who would have a ton of value that aren't part of our long-term plans. I mean, certainly Arturo Arellano, $16 million arbitration number next year is getting kind of scary. Hard to imagine Nakahara is going to be back with a $9.9 million arbitration number. He's also injured right now, though, so I don't know that people are going to be chasing after him. We're going to keep thinking about which direction we should go. I kind of feel like we're probably just going to end up doing nothing, which isn't a great answer, but I don't think we have anyone that's going to generate some wonderful life-changing returns if we trade him. But I'm also just not really sure that we should mortgage our future. Not that we even have a ton of great prospects to give up at this point, but to chase after a player who can help us, because I just don't know if there's anyone obvious out there who's going to make a difference that we can afford. And the patience may have saved us, or I don't know if saved us, but helped us a little bit. The price for Xavier Rabb from the Royals has come down dramatically over the course of the last week. In the final year of his contract, a solid major league starter, particularly with the injury we just suffered to Street. While I'd like to see what Servine could do as a starter, we are not that far out of the wild card. And we can get him for shortstop Xavier Mendoza, who was a scouting discovery about 2 years ago. Moved him into rookie ball this year, where he's hitting .250 as an 18-year-old, soon to be 19. But defensively, he's just not anything special. Offensively, he's just not anything special. He's a utility infielder in a best-case scenario several years down the line. So I think we're going to try to do something with Mendoza to bring Rabb on board. Not that we need to have them keep money. We've got lots of money to spend, and of course they're willing to just keep all of it. They're willing to keep 55% of his contract, so we'll try to be as fiscally responsible as we can, but we're going to bring Rabb on board. Again, I just don't think Mendoza is a big time prospect, and we are close enough to the wild card that I don't want to just flush this season completely, even though that may be the rational decision for those of you who are more objective observers of how this season has gone than maybe I'm being. But we're going to go ahead and bring Rab on board and see if maybe he can give us some help in the rotation down the stretch. And I think that means Servine's going back down to AAA. I don't know who else we'd want to trade. I shopped Wright, just couldn't get anything in return, and think he will be more effective out of the bullpen. So we're going to bring Rab up onto the team. And that will push Astorga and Valadez down in the rotation. So with Arroyo, Smith, Rab, and then Street when he's back, I feel like we've got 4 pretty solid starters for the postseason. Obviously, the big question is whether we'll be in the postseason. I don't mind the rotation that we've got now if we get there, particularly given that Rab and Street are both lefties. So we would have 2 lefties and 2 righties in the rotation. Just don't know that we're going to get to the postseason, but feel like this trade at least keeps the hopes alive for us for a little while longer without us spending too much. And as we reach the trade deadline, we're 54-58, 15 games back in the division. Taking a look at the standings, we're the first team out of the wild card, are 4.5 back, tied with the Cardinals. So definitely have some work to do to get there. But it's not impossible. We still have 2 months in the season. And right fielder Alex Ruacho is coming off of the IL. He's had a pretty disappointing year. Only 5 home runs and a .251 average and a 379 at-bats. Certainly profiles as someone who should be a little more productive than that, in my opinion. Has definitely been above average offensive player over the course of his career, even though unfortunately 2 of the last 3 seasons that hasn't been the case. But hopefully we can get a little more out of him. Alex Perkins has been up, not hitting all that much, and Jorge Lebron, another guy who is a familiar name that we had assigned to a minor league contract. 2 for 2 and 2 at-bats since we brought him up when we sent Nakahara to the IL, but not playing all that much. So we are going to waive and DFA the aging Jorge Lebron and bring Ruacho back up to the big club. And here on deadline day, we still do have money to take on a contract, do a final quick look of who's available on the trade block. Not a lot out there batter-wise, still kind of the familiar names. Just don't think that there's any potential difference makers. And then the pitching side, obviously we already made a trade. I don't think there's anything else for us to do. 54-58 is not great. See what happens in this game against St. Louis today, but we are going to move on, and we are done with our trade deadline work for this season. This is the team that we are going to run with. See, attendance is down. Our record is worse. Fan interest is waning. Still are actually generating a tiny bit more revenue than we did a year ago, but that could certainly change if we start having 12, 15,000 people in the stands for a lot of games in August and September particularly. So want to remain competitive and in this race as long as possible and hopefully get this team back to the playoffs. But we will see what happens with this game against the Cardinals. They're, as I mentioned, a team that we're battling. Us and them are chasing after that 3rd wild card spot, 6th seed for the National League in the playoffs. So it would certainly be a big win for us if we are able to get the W. Unfortunately, we did not. Fell to St. Louis 7-4 yesterday. So as we begin the month of September, or the month of August, it's not September yet, not looking great. 4.5 out in the wild card, 15.5 out in the division, 54 and 59. Taking a look at our team stats, last in the National League in runs scored, 8th in runs allowed. So mediocre pitching and a bad offense adds up to a 54 and 59 record. It seems like basically everyone on the team is just kind of underperforming a bit offensively. We didn't lose a ton offensively on this team. I felt like we actually lost more pitching. Offensively, all we really lost was Henry Gonzalez, who would become a 4th or 5th outfielder for us, and then Bobby Guzman, who would become a good utility infielder. But neither of those guys were big offensive players at this point in their careers. But there's just a malaise over this team. And we've got very few people that are performing at expectations. And we've got a lot of people that are under expectations. Our defense is also worse this year. I have recently moved Luis Linares back into starting shortstop against righties with some of the injuries we've had. Moved Juan Castillo to third base. That strengthens our defense at both of those positions. But this team, with the departures of all the pitchers, I was more worried that our pitching would take a big step back, and it has taken a step back, certainly. But it's been an average pitching staff. It hasn't been the solution, but it hasn't been the big problem either. The offense has just been brutal. And we will see if we can change that over the last couple months of the season. Arellano has a 3 WAR. Nobody else on the team even has a 2 WAR at this point. You know, Lupe Zelaya has been fine. 254, 22 homers, 61 ribbies. But last year he was 289, 37, and 107. Just not producing at quite the same level. Julio Castillo is a rookie last year, 261, 28, 119. Batting average similar at 258, but the power and particularly the run driving inability just not the same as it was a year ago. Alex Ruacho has been hurt, but 275 and 15 homers to 250 and 5 homers. Juan Castillo, 245 with 12 homers, 242 with 5 homers this year. Players haven't fallen off the cliff, but they just are all a little to materially worse than last year. Danny Kelez, 250 last year, but 25 homers and 336 at-bats. 258 this year, actually a better batting average, but only 10 homers in 3 fewer at-bats. So if he hits 15 home runs in his next 3 at-bats, he'll be right where he was a year ago. It's just everyone is doing a little worse. And it adds up to a team that's doing much worse. But we'll see how the last 2 months of the season go. We didn't throw in the towel. We brought Xavier Rabb on board, although he did get an L in his first game with us. We will potentially be getting Nakahara and Street back in late August, early September, to give our lineup hopefully another boost and give our pitching staff certainly a boost with Street. And we'll see what happens. I don't want to say I'm optimistic. I think that would be overstating things, but I think we've got a chance to get this team into the playoffs. Everyone's not going to keep kind of underperforming for another 2 months. So we'll see what happens in August and September. And we'll find out what happens in our next episode. Thanks so much for watching, and hope you have a great day.